Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And Arif, we just had a federal election, and like most elections, candidates make promises. And one of those promises that we heard was that our prime minister and his party were going to look into ending the closed bidding process for purchasing homes in Ontario. What do you think of that?
I think it's an election promise, and doesn't really matter which party you align yourself to over the history of our great nation and many nations around the world. There is propaganda, there is marketing of why you should vote for me, and that's what this is. And I think Canadians can look back a few years, 2 years ago, as well as 4 years before that, at the promises and the election promises that were made by all of the parties, including the current minority ruling party in Canada, the Liberal Party, and decide for themselves what value and what worth those promises that were made still held as little as 2 weeks after the election and as much as 6 years after that election.
Yeah, and as a
That's my
realtor,
non-answer to you.
a longtime participant in the political action committee for the Canadian Real Estate Association, I was particularly focused on what policies, what offerings, what promises were in there that would directly impact on home buyers and home sellers in Canada. And we do have a housing crisis in Canada, and we've touched on that over and over again. And I got to say, some of the promises in regards to housing seemed weak to me. And the biggest one that was in there was this promise to end the closed bidding system. Now, for those
Mike, let me give you a little bit of feedback on that as someone who's not involved in your political action committee, and as someone who's not, I'm obviously involved in the industry, if you will, of trading homes and trading mortgages, so to speak. However, what I would say to you is that if I look back at the greatest governments and the greatest leaders, in whether it's in industry or in government in general, the most humble and the most effective leaders have been ones who say, listen, I'm going to be your spokesperson. I'm going to be your cheerleader. I'm going to follow what my conscience tells me. I'm going to follow what the data tells me. However, I know, and I'm going to be straightforward to you, my fellow neighbor, my fellow Canadian, and let you know that I am not the answer myself. I'm going to surround myself by the experts, or with the experts, and I'm going to build a great team of advisors around me, and I'm going to consult with those advisors who are closer to the issue at hand, and I'm going to bring forth the recommendations of the greatest minds. That's what a great leader would do to me. And if I'm hearing you correctly, the Canadian Real Estate Association, the Ontario Real Estate Association, and all of its stakeholders would advise against this recommendation.
Yeah. And just for those who may not understand the difference between the two, there's an open bidding process and a closed bidding process. And maybe we don't understand that both have existed, both have been available to the public to use, but the preferred method for buying and selling homes for as long as homes have been bought and sold in this country has always been the closed bidding process. Now, in one system, you bid on a home. If a second person bids on a home, the price that's offered is protected. Whereas in the open bidding system, I see what you've bid, you see what I've bid. And much like eBay, if I want to increase that bid by $1, ideally, I can beat you out on that. But the problem is that does not solve the problem of
let's not get into that yet. Let's not get into that yet, Mike, because I think there's a lot to unpack and explore in that.
For sure.
What is the implied benefit? What is the suggested benefit that this open? I mean, first and foremost, I'm going to give credit where due, or be fair and say I don't think that the Liberal government or the Prime Minister invented the term open bidding. No, I think you've always been there. That quite well. It's always been there. However, I think that there's been propaganda or a play on the fact that up until now, closed equals bad, closed equals secretive, and secretive is bad, and it puts somebody at a disadvantage, and open is good, and open is inherently, angelic and fair in nature. So let's actually talk about what would be implied by open.
Yeah. Well, I would word that differently from what you've just said there, in that we typically, when there's a balance in the market and the supply and demand are more equal, rather than now where we see greater demand than supply, closed bidding has not been an issue. More often than not, during most of my career, when I brought a bid forward on a home, I was the only person bringing a bid forward, and it was either accepted or rejected.
Nice.
But in recent years, we tend to see multiple, 2, 3, 4 bids on the same
Love
home.
it.
And yes, that's uncomfortable and it's awkward, but we have a society here of people, not new Canadians, but new home buyer aged Canadians, a lot of millennials coming up, who grew up in a system where they eliminated in the schools competition, where instead of first, second, and third in track and field, everybody got a participation badge. But in commerce, there are clear winners and losers. And yes, it's uncomfortable to be one of the losers, but it's unavoidable. There will be losers in the bidding process on a home. And making the bidding process transparent does not resolve that. There's still going to be a winner. And the fallacy that somehow home prices will taper off or level off if we can see what the other guy's bidding, I think the opposite is true. And I think it's evident if you look at Australia and New Zealand, who do use the open bidding system, where basically people gather on front lawns of homes when they go up for sale, or they gather online.
Yeah.
And there's this fever created where everybody's bidding and then egos get involved.
Yeah, we got to go to break in just a sec, Mike. I want to jump in there for a second though, and rebut that entire ideology just for a second.
Sure.
Okay, to suggest that a bidding system, an auction system, is the better way to go because it's open and transparent actually flies in the face of all of those folks who say it's dirty, it's a dirty system, and only the rich people win, and only the rich people get to buy the homes, and the rest of us are left out. In fact, that's exactly what would happen if it was an open and transparent, as you call it, bidding system. Only the person with the deepest pockets is going to win every single time. When you have a closed system and when you have a protected system, here's one thing that we haven't talked about. And I'm not saying you in general, I'm saying the whole argument hasn't really discussed. Who's to say that as a seller, me or you, all right, who's to say that I have to sell to the highest bidder? What if I want to sell it to the person I just get a good feeling about? What if I want to sell it to the person who offered a cover letter with their bid that has a story that says, my mother and father grew up in this house or in this neighborhood, and I'd like my children to do so, or I'm separated and I want to be near my children's other guardian parent, and we want to be in the same neighborhood. What's wrong with saying it's not about price?
Well,
Mike, we got to go to break. I want to leave you with that thought. When we come back, there's lots to talk about. Financial implications and things that go far beyond just what the winning bid or offer might look like.
Yeah.
If this is resonating with you, I invite you to stay with us for more of this dialogue on Hitting Home with Mike and Arf. We'll be right back after the break.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and this is an interesting topic, and it's one that's on the minds of many if you've bought and sold a home recently or plan to buy and sell a home, and that is the values, the pros and cons of an open bidding purchase system versus a closed bidding system. And one of the things you touched on just before the break was that it does put all the emphasis on the actual price of the home, and there are other values that are hidden within there. There are many things a buyer or a seller, I should say, should be looking at, and a good realtor is going to advise their seller to be looking at, in addition to just the price of the home that they sell for. There are a number of things, the conditions that are added in there. The person who is looking, what is their story? You touched on that. I would much rather sell my home to a family who I know is going to enjoy my home than to the person who is going to chop it up and turn it into a rooming house, to be frank. And as a seller, I have that ability to pick and choose between that. So price alone, I think going here is taking us in the wrong direction. And again, it's not a ploy that is going to soften the climbing rate of the rate of climb of house
Yeah.
prices in Canada. It's just another tactic, and it's an easy, quick fix. It's ramen noodles, and the government can, with the stroke of a pen, create this policy. And the problem is we have more people. We've got a population that increases at a greater rate than we supply housing to house those people, and we need to fix that. And that's harder,
Mike,
and
it's
that
funny.
takes a lot more work, and government's not doing that to the degree.
I almost get the feeling like we're repeating ourselves for the last couple of years, and perhaps we are, but there's context, right? Context. And you are absolutely 100% correct, in my opinion, that we are looking at every possible solution except for the one that's right in front of our face. And the one that's right in front of our face does take some political will. Let's be blunt. All right. It means that we have to invite developers to develop more. It means that we have to change the face of certain neighborhoods from being necessarily single family detached homes only to include mixed use or multi-unit homes. Maybe it's walk-ups, maybe it's condos, maybe it's townhomes, maybe it's a condo. Who knows? And certainly, I raised this, or we raised this as a show in the last 19 months. Is all this push towards condos? What has the pandemic taught us? Do we really, as Canadians, want to embrace that? It doesn't make it less relevant that it's part of the conversation. And if I will put things into context, Mike, we have approximately 300,000 new Canadians coming in just as immigrants to Canada. Forget the fact that, as you touched on earlier, the baby boomer generation is slowly, moving along, and we are now being overshadowed, if you will, or the new largest segment of our population is the millennial. And
millennials who are coming into that home buying age right now.
Yeah.
And it's about 100,000 of those new Canadians who land in Ontario every year too.
Sure. So the fact of the matter is the pace of whether it's immigration, migration, or just simply the growth of population, including the fact that those of us who are in the boomer generation are living longer and staying housed in place longer.
Speak for yourself.
All of this factored together is the equation itself. Whether you like it or not, it is the equation. And you're absolutely right. Some simple stroke of a pen is mere window dressing, and it doesn't address the
actual. It's a flourish.
Yeah. So I want to touch on something else though, Mike, and really, I think we can put a pin in that one and say, we've been saying it for a while and we'll say it again. The solution is adding housing stock. I'm not telling you which version of housing stock. Add housing stock. It'll soften that competition a little bit. It'll make
not just stock, but the right stock. And the majority of people surveyed say they want to live in a detached home. They don't want to live in a 700 square foot vertical ice cube tray in downtown Toronto.
It's true.
And that seems to be what gets built. So
I want to eat dessert all the time too. It doesn't mean it's going to be the right thing. And I'm not suggesting that detached are bad. I live in one. I'm lucky that's I get to live in the one that I want. Here's my thought though, Mike. There's something else that we haven't talked about, and we've got a few minutes left before we have to go to break. And that is the fact that fundamentally this recommendation is flawed. It's actually, in my opinion, as a professional in the financial services sector of the real estate market, is that I believe it actually sets people up for disaster. It sets people up for, making irrational decisions. When I'm helping somebody, if I'm doing my job correctly, you've heard me say this before, I would prefer that people go and speak to a mortgage specialist, agent, broker, pick your word, pick your choice. I choose brokers. Go speak with a mortgage broker. Don't worry about a pre-approval because they're garbage and they're worthless. They're not worth the paper that they're written on, just in the term itself. But go and speak with somebody and actually lay out what you've got. What are you coming to the table with? What are you interested in? What are my must-haves? What am I bringing to the table in terms of credit? What am I bringing to the table in terms of a partner on this transaction? What type of employment do I have, self or employed? Is it stable? Is it consistent? Is it temporary? Is it contract? My credit decent. All of those things need to be brought forth
Well,
first.
that's it. It's not just about winning and losing. Winning is not the ultimate in any home purchase scenario.
Listen, I don't want to be the
Ideally,
grumpy
it's
guy,
about
Mike.
coming away where you're within your means, within your comfort zone, and with that purchase.
Absolutely.
If you win, but you've now put yourself into territory that's dangerous financially for you, that's not a clear win.
Listen,
That's a risk.
I love being spontaneous. I think spontaneous fun. Please don't misinterpret me as that grumpy old codger who's going to ruin all the fun of the whole thing. It's supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
What's not fun is finding out later that you're on the hook for something that you offered and can't back up, and you're getting sued because you couldn't complete the
Yeah.
transaction. What's not fun is finding out that you weren't actually properly prepared and equipped to service the debt that you took on, and suddenly your family's in turmoil, your financial strains are actually having strain on your relationship with your significant partner or whatever it may be. That stuff's not fun. So I'm the guy who says, I want you to go into the transaction and into the process well equipped, well informed, so that you are well qualified to go up to a certain amount. And what will happen? It's human nature. You go on Kijiji, you go to the farmer's auction, you go to some other type of auction, you're going to go bid, and you get the energy, you feel the adrenaline in your blood, and you're going to go and blurt something out that you're going to be on the hook for, and then you're going to go try and figure it out, and you might not be prepared. We got to go to break, Mike.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, I'm not the fear monger. I'm not the guy who wants to say it's all doom and gloom. I'm saying I don't think it's a very intelligent thing to do. I want people to be spontaneous where it's appropriate. And I don't think that this is one of those scenarios. We got to go to break, though. Come back and join us for more of this exciting conversation around the open versus closed bidding process. And we'll be right back with more Hitting Home with Mike and RF.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we're talking about open bidding versus closed bidding and how our government is contemplating eliminating the closed bidding system that traditionally we have used for buying homes for eons, and replacing that with solely an open bidding system where you see what that other person is bidding. Again, as I said earlier, much like eBay, where you can look at what the other guy bids and effectively maybe bid $1, $10 more, and ideally you're going to win that. I don't think that applies as easily as that to the house buying process, and we've touched on some of the reasons why. And one of the other things I've been thinking all along as we talked about this, about one of those programs you see on TV, I think it's Barrett Jackson housing, or not housing, but automobile auctions, classic car auctions. And you see the egos at play at these auctions there, where you've got the guys in the audience, and it's less and less about the product, the car that they're bidding on. It becomes about the egos, the competition between the egos. And there's a risk of that happening in the housing scenario, which is going to push more and more people out of the process. There's also the risk there, and we can't ignore this, that in many auction scenarios, there are people planted in those auctions who will drive up the price. And then they step back once the price hits a certain point. And who's to say that can't happen in the real estate auction scenario? We've seen it recently in the stock market here with gaming stocks recently, where prices were manipulated up and down. And that's dangerous. We don't want and we don't need that in our housing market.
Mike, it's not that it could happen. It's that it does happen.
Yeah.
And it would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And remember a couple of things. There's something called, we refer to as fiduciary responsibility. And that is that in any transaction, it is the responsibility of the person who is expected to be more informed, to ensure a fair process, to ensure a safe and suitable outcome for the parties, whether it's your lawyer, your realtor, your mortgage broker, et cetera. And there is actually an opportunity for if you will, the normal citizen to say, but I didn't know. And so there's a reason why there are people who have jobs and positions that they do. They're there to safeguard the well-being of the participants. They're there to provide good guidance. You wouldn't walk into, an open heart surgery and say, don't worry, doc, I read this on Google. I've watched a YouTube video. I got this. I can handle it. Hand me the scalpel. You're not going to do that. It's not a good idea.
And in the fast-paced fever of an open bidding auction, those people who should have your back, who should be guiding you every step of the way, they're unable to participate. That you've got bids that are happening in real time, instantaneously, and it's so easy to find yourself on the other side of that invisible line. Whereas with the closed bidding system, you have time to ponder, you have time to reflect, you have time to consult, you have time to check your numbers and give some things some thought here, and decide whether or not you want to up your bid, stay with your bid, or step away.
And it doesn't.
And that's why I think that in and of itself is the primary reason why the closed bidding system is safer and it's better overall for
Mike. It doesn't mean though in the closed bidding system that you cannot be outbid by another party. You can hold another bid. That you can, when you put in your offer, right in there, you stipulate the other party who's now receiving the offer or the counter offer has 12 hours, 24 hours to consider the offer and respond. By the way, there's 1, 2, or 3 other offers potentially sitting in the wings. It doesn't mean that you cannot be outbid. It means at the moment, it was the offer that was presented that was accepted, and you have an opportunity to have a cool head, get good guidance from your team, have a discussion with potentially your significant others or someone else in your circle of influence, and decide for you if this is what you're going to do and go ahead and follow through. And the
bottom
other
line,
thing, Mike, it's super important that people recognize this. Just because you go in and you outbid the person beside you doesn't mean that you're going to get the financing that you will end up
the other side of it.
Right? The bank still has to determine that the offer that was accepted actually represents fair market value. So yes, we see all the time people starting their listing, making an offer, a home for sale on the market for potentially $100,000 below fair market value, anticipating that it's going to blow up and sell for $200,000 over fair market value. But it still has to, if you require financing, go through an appraisal process and be approved by the person who's actually going to lend you the money for the next 30 years.
Yeah, for sure. And in the end here, in summary, we have a public, a great number of them, want it to be easier, want it to be simpler. They want to eliminate winners and losers somehow. This is not going to eliminate any of those things. At the end of the day, home buyers, they need to be educated and well advised. And that's where a good realtor, a good mortgage broker is important. And I say good, I mean, someone who's experienced, who's not some hot shot that's only looking to close that next deal, but who's going to have your back and keep you within the realm of safety there financially. And supply and demand and the health of the overall economy are the two things that determine home values, whether home prices go up or down. It's not whether we have an open or a closed bidding system. Every action by government to interfere with the free trade of goods, including homes, is damaging our overall economy and our free market. And they need to just step back and let the free market function as it does, because you start to manipulate. And we've seen it in the past almost every time. There are other problems that show themselves down the road. And oftentimes those new problems are worse than the problems they were ideally trying to fix.
You are 100% correct, Mike. I agree with you. It does not in itself mean that that the system is flawless. It is flawed. I think what we're doing, though, is we're playing a bit of whether it's sleight of hand or distraction. The problem itself is not the bidding system. The problem, as you've identified it, is if we're to assume that everyone should have access to affordable housing, well, then we need to increase housing supply so that it becomes affordable by nature. We got to go. We're out of time.
Do the heavy lifting, government. This is what we need.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for having this engaging conversation, and you at home, thank you for watching. As always, we'll see you again next time on Hitting Home with Mike and Ara.